Picking back up at Genesis chapter 34, verse 1. It says, "And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land." So they're in the land of the Hivites, okay? And we're going to see here that they're already starting to do things that they shouldn't be doing, like wearing jewelry and all of that. So Dinah has gone out, and she's probably made herself a little bit more beautiful than she already was, and that causes her some issues, right? So we're gonna see in verse 2, it says, "And when Shechem, meaning back, and the son of Hamor, meaning red ass, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her, and he defiled her." So again, he raped her. He took her by force, and he now has her being held captive. Verse 3, "And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel and spoke kindly of the damsel." Again, it might say that he loved her. I'm sure that he did. She was beautiful. But the problem with this is that he took her by force. And the verse prior, in verse 2, it says that he defiled her. So he was lusting over her beauty. And again, we're starting to see the same attack on the children of Yahweh. Satan will try to get in anywhere he can when it comes to this seed that's been protected since Genesis chapter 1, or Genesis, chapter 1. Verse 4, "And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, Get me this damsel to wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah his daughter. Now his sons were with him in the cattle of the field, and Jacob held his peace until they were come." So the reason why Jacob's holding his peace is, again, because they're outnumbered. They're in a land where they are extremely outnumbered. Verse 6, "And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him." Verse 7, "And the sons of Jacob came out into the field when they heard this." So again, you got to keep in mind that the sons are more upset about this, and Jacob is trying to be cautious about what's going on here. So the fact that Jacob isn't outright trying to attack them is a sign of wisdom on Jacob's side, and you got to keep in mind his sons are a little younger here. And when they hear this, it says, "And the men were grieved, and they were very wroth." So they're very upset, they're very angry, "because he had wrought folly in Israel in laying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not be." So again, it's just reconfirming that the children of Israel, or this holy seed, wasn't to be mixing with other nations. And we see this as well with in all throughout the prophets, where it tells us not to learn the ways of the heathen because they worship other gods. And in doing that, we're warned by the Most High that if we do that and we take their daughters and their sons and we do likewise, that it'll lead the children of Israel astray to serve other gods. Verse 8, "And Hamor communed with them, saying, The soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you to give him to wife." Verse 9, "And make ye marriages with us, and give us your daughters, and take our daughters unto you." So again, Satan is tempting, trying to get them to start mixing seed. And again, you're going to see here that Shechem's main goal here is the fact, number one, that the children of Israel are beautiful, and number two, the children of Israel just came out of the land that they were in, and Jacob has grown in cattle, and he's very wealthy now because of Yahweh blessing him for working for Laban for over 20 years. Picking up in verse 10, "And you shall dwell with us in the land shall be before you, dwell and trade ye therein, and get your possessions therein." Verse 11, "And Shechem said unto her father and unto his brethren," unto his father and unto his brethren, "Let me find grace in your eyes, that you shall say unto me, I will give." So in other words, he's saying to Jacob, "Let me find grace in your eyes that you will give me your daughter Dinah," which he's already taken. Verse 12, "Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according to ye what you shall say unto me, but give me the damsel to wife." Verse 13, "And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully." So again, we went through this the other day in Ecclesiastes, which we'll cover just a brief part of that. But the sons of Jacob are answering Shechem in a deceitful manner, and they're doing this on purpose. And he said, because he had defiled Dinah, their sister. So this is why they're dealing deceitfully with Shechem. In Ecclesiastes 3, just make a note of this. Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8. This is the writings of Solomon, right? And in verse 3, he says, there's a time to unalive, and a time to heal, and a time to break down, and a time to build up. And then in verse 8, he says, and a time to love, and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. So, again, this is why we're always reiterating, know who your neighbor is. Okay, verse 14. And they said unto him, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach unto us. So, again, they're making it very clear that that would just be unheard of and absolutely unacceptable. Verse 15. But in this we consent unto you, if you will be that every male of you be circumcised. Verse 16. Then we will give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters unto us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. Verse 17. But if you will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, and we will take our daughter, meaning Dinah, and we will be gone. Verse 18. And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. Verse 19. And the young men deferred not to do this thing, because they had a delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father. So again, it's mentioning that Shechem and Hamor are more honorable than the rest of their men, which isn't saying much, seeing what they've done to Dinah. Verse 20. And Hamor and Shechem and his sons came unto the gate of their city, and they communed with the men in their city, saying, these men are peaceable with us, therefore let them dwell in the land and trade therein. For the land, behold, it is large enough for both of them and both of us. Let us take their daughters for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Again, not supposed to happen. Yahweh's hand is not in this, and you're going to see Yahweh is going to correct the situation. Verse 22. Only herein with the men consent unto us for to dwell with us, to be one's people, if every male among us be circumcised, as they are circumcised. So now Shechem and Hamor are telling the rest of their men that the only way that they're going to be able to go into these daughters is if they're circumcised, right? And we just saw that Jacob's sons are dealing deceitfully with them. So we know that this is not going to come to pass. Verse 23. Now this is really, verse 23 is where you're seeing Shechem and Hamor's true heart on the situation. It says, shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? So they knew Jacob was rich. Only let us consent unto them, and we will dwell with them. Verse 24. And unto Hamor and Shechem his son hearkened all that went out of his gate of his city, and every male was circumcised, and all that went out of the gate of his city. Verse 25. Now listen, this is where it's going to get pretty crazy. And it came to pass on the third day, which would be the day when the men were the most sore after being circumcised, that the two sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, so remember those two sons because we're going to be talking about them later. These were the two brothers of her mother. Remember, there were 4 women that bore all of the children of Israel. Verse 26, and they slew Hamor and Shechem and his son with the edge of the sword, and took back Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. So we can see that Dinah was being held captive. And this is why Simeon and Levi went and slew all of the men that were circumcised by the edge of the sword. Verse 27, the sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city, because they had defiled or graped their sister. Verse 28, they took their sheep, their oxen, and their asses, and that which was in the city, and all that was in the field. Verse 29, and all their wealth, and all their little ones, and all their wives they took captive, and spoiled even all that was in the house. Verse 30. Now, here's where you're going to see that the hand of Yahweh was in this, and because Jacob was afraid because they were outnumbered. Remember, they were sojourners in a land that was not familiar to them, and Yahweh had already promised in the prior chapters to give this land to them only if they would hearken to his voice. Verse 30. And Jacob said unto Simeon and Levi, You have troubled me to make me stink among their inhabitants of their land, amongst the Canaanites and the Perizzites. So these are the descendants of the fallen. I being few in number, they should gather themselves against me and shall slay me, and I shall be destroyed in my house. So Jacob's worried about everything that he just worked for the last 20 years with Laban in Laban's land, making Laban rich, Laban changing his wages over 10 times, making it through, meeting up with his brother Esau, and things being reconciled back for a time with Esau. And now he's dealing with this. So again, his main focus should be on the fact that Yahweh told him to leave the land that he was in with Laban, and Yahweh told him that he would be with him. So Jacob's more in fear of them being attacked than the two sons were, right? So we see Simeon and Levi, they didn't care. They just wanted their sister back, and they knew that this Hivite prince had just defiled their sister, and they weren't having it, which is why it was those two, born of the same mother. Verse 31, and this is the response of the sons to Jacob. And they said, should we deal with our sister as with a harlot? So in other words, they're saying, what else should we have done? Just let her stay there and let them come and take more of our people away? Of course not. All right. Now we're going to go back through Genesis 35. That way, again, once we get into the story of Jacob, or Joseph, sorry, which is what we skipped over last time, then it'll all be back to back and it'll make a whole lot more sense. Genesis chapter 35. And Yahweh said unto Jacob, Arise and go to Bethuel, which is the house of Yah, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto Yahweh, that appear unto thee, and when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. So this is the same place where Jacob saw this ladder, where the angels were ascending and descending. The ladder is a representation of our Messiah, Yeshua. And again, we see that come to pass later on in the New Testament when Elijah and Moses appear before them. Verse 2, Then Jacob said unto his household, and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. So here, this is part of the reason how Dinah got herself in trouble. They got into the land, and they're wearing jewelry and stuff, and we know that jewelry came from one place, which was the fallen, along with makeup and the cutting of roots and all of these other things. We covered part of that back in Genesis chapter 6. All right, verse 3. And let us arise and go up to Bethuel, and I will make there an altar unto Yahweh, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the day which I went. Now, again, as we pick up here, you're going to see that when Jacob goes to build this altar before Yahweh, guess what Yahweh does? He causes all of the surrounding cities to stay away from them, to not bother them, which is where his mind should have been set when Simeon and Levi went and slew and got their sister back, right? Verse 4, And they gave unto Jacob all their strange gods which were in their hand, and all of their earrings, and which was in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. So again, you can see that they were already starting to incorporate things that shouldn't have been part of Jacob's flock, because Jacob was and still is serving the Most High, and so are his children. Now, by the time we get to chapter 49, you're going to see how Jacob is going to prophesy over each child. And I want you to remember this about what Simeon and Levi have done, right? Because even when we get to that part, when Jacob is speaking over them, Jacob's mind is still in a place where he doesn't fully understand everything that's to come after the book of Genesis. Let's see. Make sure my connection's good. All right. Verse 5. And they journeyed, and the terror of Yahweh was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. So again, this is where Dinah went, Dinah, this is where she went wrong. She went out into their land and was captured by Shechem and Hamor and defiled. So now we're seeing that had they just listened, that never would have, come to happen to where Dinah would have been defiled by this Hivite prince. Verse 6. So Jacob came to Luz. Luz, this is the name that was before it was renamed Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan. That is Bethel. He and all of his people that were with him. Verse 6. So Jacob came to, I just read that, didn't I? Yeah, I just read that. Sorry, verse 7. And he builded there an altar and called the place El Bethel, meaning Yah is El of his house. Again, you're seeing this place is being named and renamed as each descendant is going back to this place. It says, because there Yahweh appeared unto him when he had fled from the face of his brother. Speaking of Esau. Verse 8. But Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak, and the name of it was called Alabaroth. Verse 9. And Yahweh appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Pandamaram and blessed him. Verse 10. And Yahweh said unto him, Thy name is Jacob, meaning contender or heel grabber. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. So, again, this is Yahweh confirming what the angel told him in the prior chapters when he wrestles with this angel, and the angel touches his hip and makes that sinew to shrink. And then it said even after that Jacob proceeded with a limp. So this is establishing the name of Israel, because right here will be the last child born out of the 12 patriarchs. Verse 11. And Yahweh said unto him, I am Yahweh Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. Verse 12. And the land which I gave unto Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. So again, we're seeing that the Father is reestablishing promises and covenants with the children of Israel. And he never goes back on his promises, right? He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He does not change. So when we read something in the Old Testament, it doesn't change in the New Testament. Again, we'll see that the priesthood will change, but we don't see anywhere that the law changes. As far as the Levitical part of the law, those were for the Levites. Hence, we don't have a temple right now. And it's not necessary for us to do that, as the prophets say that our praise and worship are the bulls and calves of our lips. So it's honoring the Father with our lips until we do have the temple, because the prophets say that we will continue on with all of the customs that were here in the beginning of this book when the 1,000-year millennial reign comes. Verse 13. And Yahweh went up from his place where he was talking with him. Verse 14. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even the pillar of stone. And he poured out a drink offering thereon, and he poured out the oil thereon. Again, this is speaking of the same oil that the Hebrews and the Israelite people are using to anoint kings and all of that. It's a type of olive oil. Verse 15. And Jacob called the name of the place where he spake with Yahweh Bethel. Verse 16. And he journeyed from Bethel and was there but a little way to come to Ephrathah. And Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. So again, keep in mind, this is Jacob's favorite wife, and he also has two favored children. And again, we understand that When a man has more than one wife, he's supposed to treat all of them equally, and we're not supposed to love one child more than another child, right? Verse 17, and it came to pass when she was in labor that the midwife said unto her, Fear not, for thou shalt have this son also. Verse 18, and it came to pass as her soul was departing, for she had died, and he called, and she called his name Benoi, meaning son of my sorrow. But his father called him Benjamin, which is son of my right hand. Verse 19. And Rachel died and was buried in the way of Ephrathah, which is Bethlehem, the house of bread. Now this again will be the same place that our Messiah will be born. Verse 20. And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave, and that is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. And Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Adar, meaning the flock. And it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and laid with Bilhah his father's concubine. So this, again, in the future, we're going to see that because of this act, he's going to lose his heritage in the coming chapters. And Israel heard it, so Jacob heard it, and now the sons of Jacob were 12. So we now have the 12 patriarchs born. I'll explain more of that as we go on. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon and Levi, and Judah and Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. These will be the two that, as we saw when Esau was approaching, we saw that Jacob set them up in threes and kept Rachel and his son back with him because he loved them the most in case Esau was going to attack. Verse 25, the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaiden, Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaiden, Gad, Asher, and these are the sons of Jacob, which were born unto him in Pandamaram. And Jacob came unto Isaac his father unto Mamre, unto the city of Arba, which is in Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. Verse 28. And these days of Isaac were 180 years. And Isaac gave up the ghost and died and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days, and his son Esau and Jacob buried him. Now, again, remember, Jacob was back with Laban and worked with Laban for 20 years, and then Yahweh sees the affliction that Laban has placed Jacob under, and he tells him, rise up and go back to this land where I will protect you. In other words, he's sending this angel before him to keep him in the way. We see that he wrestles with this angel. And again, he knows that Isaac is close to his death, right? And so he has he has Jacob and Esau reunite in the chapters prior to this. And for this reason, I believe, number one, to bury their father, and number two, that they could be reconciled for a time. Again, you're going to see that later on as we continue on that these two brothers and their offspring are going to continue to clash. Genesis chapter 36, we did this the same last time. I'm not going to go through all of the begats. I'm just going to highlight the key points in this chapter. And again, a lot of the names of the generations of Esau, who is Edom. This is chapter 36, verse 1. It says, now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. So Esau becomes Edom, as we saw in the prior chapters, because Esau mixed seed and married two Hivite women, which are descendants of the Canaanite people. So again, we're gonna skip through all of the names. I'm just gonna read the last verse 43, and it talks about how these become dukes. And then it says, these are the dukes of Edom according to their habitations in the land of their possession. He is Esau, the father of the Edomites. So it starts off in the first verse and it ends in the last verse, letting you know that Esau, because of his choices, selling his birthright, despising his birthright, marrying into these other tribes, so on and so forth, he becomes his own people. Again, the birthright was rightfully his. And we're going to see the same thing with Joseph's two children, starting off here in Genesis 37. Okay, Genesis 37, and it says in verse 1, "And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, when feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought upon his father their evil report." So this is the reason why Joseph gets sold into being a servant for Pharaoh. It's telling us in verse 2 here that Joseph is always going back to his father and telling his father everything that his brothers are doing that are wrong. That's why it says that he went back to his father and gave him an evil report. He went to Zilpah and Bilhah first. But verse 3, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors." Now, this coat of many colors was a special coat. It was a first fruits coat. Okay, he would be the heir to Jacob. And again, we're seeing that Jacob is going to pay for some of the stuff that he had done by placing them first, but at the same time, you're going to see that Joseph will become a savior for not only his own people, but for all of the land of Egypt and all the surrounding areas in the coming chapters. Verse 4, "And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all of his brethren, they hated him, and they could not speak peaceably unto him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him yet the more." Now listen, I want you guys to really remember this dream that he's going to have, because it's going to come to pass in the coming chapters. He says in verse 7, "For behold, we were binding up sheaves in the field," or wheat, "and lo, my sheaf arose." These are bundles. They would take the bundles of the wheat or whatever it was they were growing, and they would wrap a rope around it, and they would stack them up, right? And he says, "And my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood round about, and they made obeisance to my sheaf." Let's see. "And his brethren said unto him, Shall thou indeed reign over us? Or shall thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him all the more for his dreams and for his words." Now, again, I've said this before, but keep this in mind. These brothers are older than him. He's 17 years old. His brothers have already just went and slew Shechem and Hamor, and they've been through the thick and the thin of everything that was going on. And before this entire book is over, you're going to see that they're upwards. I think the oldest is 47 years old. So they're getting up there in age. They're not little kids, and he is, because he was the last born of Rachel, right? We just witnessed that Rachel passed away, giving birth. All right, verse 10. "And he told his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him." Wait, I skipped verse 9. "And he dreamed yet another dream, and told his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." Okay, so this is not just one dream that he had. We just read the first dream, which their sheaves were bowing down to him. Now he's having a dream which has to do with Revelation chapter 12, verse 9. And it's much more than just that, but this is talking about the constellations that make up the story that's going to tell the end of the book. So this is, again, why we have to understand the entire beginning of the book and the entire ending of the book. Now, if you haven't went through Revelation chapter 12, I have an entire documentary on Revelation 12, covering all of this dream that Joseph has and how it comes to pass. All right. Now we'll pick up in verse 10. And he told his and he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? Now, this is indeed about to happen. Now, obviously, it can't happen with the mother because she's, well, speaking of Rachel, she's passed. But the other mothers that are there and all of that, he's going to become the Savior to all of them, not of his own works, but because of the Father. And this is the whole purpose of why this story is happening. Verse 11, and his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. So Jacob's wiser. He's the oldest, obviously, he's the father, and he's the wisest. His brethren just hated him for saying this, but the father heard, Jacob heard what he said, or Israel heard what he said. Verse 12, and his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock of Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, Here I am. Verse 14, and he said unto him, Go, I pray thee, whether it be well with thy brethren and with their flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Verse 15, and a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering around in the field, and the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? So again, 17-year-old boy, he's not going out to this well, which is a well that's near a very common way that different people from different places would travel to get into the land of Egypt and to leave from the land of Egypt. And this man sees him wandering around, and he says, What are you looking for, basically? And he realizes that the child was lost. Verse 16, and he said, again, this is speaking of Joseph, and he said, I seek my brethren, tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. Verse 17, and the man said, They are departed from hence, for I heard them say, Let's go to Dothan, meaning the two wells, and Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. Verse 18, and when they saw him from afar off, even before he came unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Verse 19, and they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. They can tell that they're just disgusted by him. Verse 20, Come now, therefore, let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast has devoured him, and we will see what shall become of his dreams. Verse 21, Reuben, remember, Reuben is the oldest of all of the children. He heard this and delivered him out of their hands and said, Let us not unalive him. Verse 22, and Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid them out of their hands to deliver him to his father. So Reuben's plan was to calm them down and say, okay, let's throw him in this pit and let's leave him there. But Reuben's plan was to go back and pull him out and take him back to his father. Verse 23, and it came to pass when Joseph was come up to his brethren, that they stripped Joseph of his coat of many colors that was on him. Verse 24, and they took him, and they cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. Verse 25, and they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices and balm and myrrh, and going to carry it down to Egypt. Verse 26, now here's Judah stepping in as well, but Judah is only doing what I believe Reuben was trying to do, which is to prevent them from shedding blood. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Verse 27, Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let our hand not be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And the other brethren were content. So they were like, okay, let's pull him up out of this pit and let's give him to the Ishmaelites, who will take him into Egypt, and they will sell him. Verse 28. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. Again, the normal going rate for this was 30 pieces, which is the same amount of silver that Judas paid or was paid to betray our Messiah. So they're betraying their brother in the same way. And this whole story of Joseph is going to be the story of our Messiah. It's just a foreshadowing of it. Let's see. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. Verse 29. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned unto his brethren and said, The child is not, and I, whither shall I go? So again, Reuben's upset. Reuben was planning to go back and pull his brother out of this pit, and now he's really upset with his brethren because of what they've just done. Verse 32. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their fathers, and they said, This we have found, know not whether it be your son's coat or not. And he knew it was, and he said, My son's coat, an evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent into pieces. All right, also, there's much more that goes into this, but if you guys understand the crucifixion and the resurrection and all of that, then you'll see and you'll pick up on some of the key points here. But this was premeditated. These brothers knew what they were doing. And here we have Reuben and Jacob allowing them to actually, for the Ishmaelites to take him into this land, that wasn't right either. So in my opinion, Reuben here was the only one who had his heart was of the right intentions. And again, this goes to show that age also has a huge role in a lot of the stories that we see in Scripture because it shows wisdom. So Reuben, being the eldest, wanted to do the right thing, and Judah realizes later on in this story, of course, that what they had done was wrong. And we're going to see some interesting stuff with Judah as well. Verse 35. And all of his sons and all of his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, For I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. So his father just lost his most favorite son, right? And in that we see the same story playing out with our father and his son who stood in for our sins. Verse 36. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of his guard. Okay, now we're going to skip chapter 38. Excuse me, I get the verses and chapters mixed up, my head injury. Genesis chapter 38 is already posted and covered. This is what Judah does by marrying a Canaanite woman. And Yahweh strikes his two children down. And then we see that Judah sends Tamar away back to her father's house, keeping her from having the seed that should have come through her anyways. And we see Tamar deceives Judah later on down the line, and she puts on clothing of a harlot, and Judah goes into her, and then they find out later on that she's pregnant, and then Judah is exposed for what he had done. So again, if you guys want to read the story of this, you're more than welcome to. We did cover it on the last video that's posted, and it's at the very end of that video. All right, Genesis chapter 39. This is picking back up with Joseph. And Joseph was brought down into Egypt, and Potiphar, and the officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him to the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. Verse 2. And Yahweh was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that Yahweh was with him, and that Yahweh made all that he did to prosper in his hand. Verse 4. And Joseph found grace in the sight, and he served him and made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. So again, we're seeing that Yahweh, his hand was in this protection of Joseph, even though what we just read was pretty awful. This had to come to pass in order for all of the land of Egypt and all of the Hebrew people and the surrounding lands of Egypt wouldn't have survived unless it was for this purpose. Verse 5, and it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and overseer of all that he had, that Yahweh blessed the Egyptian's house for Pharaoh, for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of Yahweh was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. Verse 6, and he left all that he had with Joseph in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. Again, at this time, it was forbidden for the Egyptian people to eat with any of the Israelites or Hebrew people. It was forbidden. But we're going to see something very interesting, and this will be confirmed that it was forbidden for them to do so. It'll be confirmed later on. But it was also forbidden for, well, not forbidden, but it was an abomination for the Egyptian people to have sheep. Okay? So this is going to be very important to understand who the Pharaoh is at this time later on in the story, because it's going to confirm this bloodline or this genealogy, which a lot of people skip over. And people make the mistake because they don't fully read in context what it's saying. Not only that, but history bears witness to a lot of this stuff, especially this famine that took place outside of the scriptures. History will show you that it did in fact take place. Verse 8, but he refused and said unto his master and his wife, wait, did I skip something? Yes, I did. I skipped a whole bunch. Sorry. Verse 5. No, sorry. Verse 7. Verse 7. Sorry. And it came to pass after all these things that his master's wife cast herself upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. So Potiphar's wife is now saying to Joseph, because he's overseer of all things, she's trying to get him to lie with her. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not that what this is with me in this house, and he has committed all that he hath to my hand. Verse 9, there is no greater in the house than I, neither hath he kept anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against Yahweh? And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her or to be with her. Verse 11, and it came to pass about this time, that Joseph went into the house to do business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and he fled and got himself out. Verse 13, and it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth. Verse 14, that she called upon the men of the house and spake unto them, saying, see, he hath brought an Hebrew unto us to mock us, and he came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried aloud with a loud voice. Now again, we know that she is outright lying. And again, when he took off, these garments that they would wear were very loose-fitting. So imagine the struggle that was going on. She grabs hold of him, and she's trying to pull him into a bed, or they didn't have the same beds that we would have today, but she's trying to pull on his clothing, and he lets the clothing go, and he runs out the house, probably just with an undergarment on, right? Or what we would call underwear. Verse 15, and it came to pass, when he heard that I had lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and got him out. Verse 16, and she laid upon his garment by her until his master came home. So here she is setting herself up in the house with his garment right near her, waiting for Potiphar to get back to the house. 17. And she spake unto him according to all the words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice in pride, that he left his garment with me, and he fled out. Verse 19. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant do to me, that his wrath was kindled. And verse 20, and Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison and placed a place where king's prisoners were bound, and there he was imprisoned. Verse 21. But Yahweh was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Verse 22. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all of the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. Now again, we have to keep this in mind. Who is the captain of the king's guard, of Pharaoh's guard? It's Potiphar, right? And what is he doing? I don't think he's fully hearkening to what his wife said that actually took place, because he's now taking him and placing him in the prison, but he's making him in charge of all the people that are in the prison. Verse 23, the keeper of the prison looked not to do anything that was under his hand, because Yahweh was with him, and that which he did, and Yahweh made it to prosper. Again, Genesis chapter 39, verse 1, this is how this chapter starts off. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard of the Egyptians. So again, Potiphar was in charge of all of this the whole time. All right, now I mentioned this in the prior chapters as well. Before we move into Genesis chapter 40, there were two parts in this time that made up the land of Egypt. There was the northern part and the southern part. Again, we can see this in other lands. We can look at Africa and we can see that the northern part of Africa and the southern part of Africa, what type of people are still dwelling in those lands to this day. All right, Genesis chapter 40, verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their master, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against the two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in the ward in the house of the captain's guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season in the ward. Verse 5. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream, in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker and the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. Verse 6. And Joseph came into them in the morning, and he looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. Verse 7. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his master's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly this day? Verse 8. And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to Yahweh? Tell me them, I pray you. Again, we see this throughout Scripture, that Yahweh chooses when men have dreams, especially with the pharaohs of that nature, like the book of Daniel and other places. We see that these Hebrew men, are able to interpret dreams to save their own lives and to save the lives of others. Verse 9. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said unto him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and the vine were 3 branches, and it was though it budded, and her blossoms set forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and I pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of the dream. The 3 branches are 3 days. Got to remember the significance of the 3 days. Verse 13, Yet within the 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head and restore thee unto thy place, and shall deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner from when thou wast his butler. Okay, so Joseph is just letting this butler know, which again, this butler was a tester of Pharaoh's drinks. So he would be in charge of many things, but one of those things would be before Pharaoh would take a sip out of any cup, this butler of his would test the drink to make sure it wasn't poisoned. Verse 14. Now Joseph is telling him to remember him once this comes to pass. He says, But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. Verse 15, For I indeed was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me in this dungeon. Verse 16, When the chief baker saw the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in a dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there was all manner of baker meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket which was upon my head. Verse 18, And Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets, and this word basket is like a weaved basket, so it's a kind of like a bucket, but with holes in it. So the interpretation thereof, the 3 baskets are 3 days. Again, both men, both being told that both of their dreams represent 3 days. Verse 19, Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up his head of thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat the flesh from thee. So this again was a foreshadowing of what was to take place on the cross, or on the tree, if you will. So we see that one is restored, and the other one is the unaliver that was on the tree with the other 2 out of the 3. One being our Messiah, Joseph will also be restored and be made Savior over all the land of Egypt as we continue. So we saw in the first story where Potiphar's wife tries to get him to lie with her. That's a foreshadowing of Israel playing the harlot. Okay, and then now we're seeing the foreshadow of the servants, including Joseph, again, because we're going to see that it's going to come to pass that Joseph will be released. Let's see. Verse 20, And it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all of his servants, and he lifted up his head to the chief butler of the chief baker amongst his servants. And he restored the chief butler, but unto the butlership again he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand, again, confirming that the dream had come to pass. He's now the cupbearer. But he hanged the chief baker, and Joseph had interpreted what Joseph had interpreted unto them. So the chief baker, there is no hope for him. Okay, and again, spiritually speaking, eternal life with the Father, and eternal life with Satan after the foreshadowing of our Messiah, when it actually comes to pass when the Messiah is born. All right, Genesis chapter 41, starting in verse 1. And it came to pass at the end of the 2 full years, so it's 2 full years later, after Joseph interprets this dream for both of these men, we see that the cupbearer forgets to tell Pharaoh about Joseph. So Joseph, again, is long suffering in this prison that he's been put in for no reason. Again, same as our Messiah. He didn't do anything wrong. He was a blameless man, and yet he came down here and took on the sin for all of the people that are in the land at the time when before his coming and after, right, to wash us clean. It came to pass after the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed. Now it's Pharaoh dreaming. And behold, he stood by a river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they fed in the meadow. So again, speaking of cattle. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored, and the lean-fleshed stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and the lean-fleshed kind did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. And so Pharaoh awoke. Verse 5. And he slept and dreamed a second dream. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up from one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears are blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. Verse 7. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank full ears, and Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Verse 8. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called forth all of the magicians of Egypt, and all of the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them of his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto him. So we're going to see again, later on when we get into the book of Daniel and other books, we're going to see that this is common for the pharaohs would call upon the soothsayers, the magicians, and the wise men, and would only be the children of the Most High that could truly interpret a dream properly. Okay? Verse 9. Then spake the chief butler. This is the one who got released because of Joseph, or the interpretation of Joseph's dream, rather. The chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. So now he's remembering, oh, I totally forgot to mention Joseph, who was able to interpret my dream. Verse 10. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me in the ward and the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, and he had dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. Verse 12. And therefore there was a young man, a Hebrew servant of the captain of the guard, and we told him the interpretation of our dreams, each man according to the dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto my office, and him he hanged. Verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself. Again, it was an abomination for them to have beards before Pharaoh. And he changed his raiment, and he came in unto Pharaoh. And verse 15, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard it say of thee that you doest understand a dream to interpret it. Verse 16, and Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. Yahweh shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. So again, we're always being reminded throughout the scripture that it doesn't matter if Yahweh's called you to be a teacher. It doesn't matter if Yahweh is giving people dreams or visions. Always give thanks to the Father, and always understand that it's not of our own power that we do these things. It's not of our own power that we come to understanding. It's because of the Father who reveals or allows these things to happen as a result of our obedience to his laws, statutes, and commandments. All right. We'll reread, start in verse, I pick back up in 17. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood up on the river bank. Verse 18, and behold, there came up out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed, and well-favored, and they fed in the meadow. Verse 19, and behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I had never saw in the land of Egypt for badness. Verse 20, and the lean and the ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. Verse 21, And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored as at the beginning, so I awoke. Verse 22. And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. Verse 23. And behold, the 7 ears withered thin, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. Verse 24. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears, and I told this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it unto me. Verse 25. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one, meaning both of your dreams, Pharaoh, both of the dreams that you had are one dream. Yahweh hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. So Yahweh is about to do something great in the land of Egypt. Verse 26. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. Verse 27. And the ears, the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. So we got 7 good years, 7 bad years. Verse 28. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What Yahweh is about to do showeth he unto Pharaoh. Verse 29. Behold, there come 7 years of great and plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. Verse 30. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And of all of the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. Verse 31. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of the famine following, for it shall be very grievous. Verse 32. And for the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing was established by Yahweh, and Yahweh will shortly bring it to pass. Now, I've heard people say that you don't need 2 witnesses to establish a matter. Yet the Father himself, when dealing with a Pharaoh, is establishing 2 dreams. The Father himself is making it clear to Pharaoh what the 2 dreams were and how they were one. So yes, everything in Scripture does need a witness. Not only that, but we're also seeing the beginning of the story in Genesis is telling us the end of what we're currently going through. We have 7 good years, and this doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect for everybody for 7 years leading up into tribulation. It means that we had a good season of time where people were asleep, people were living the facade of the American dream, and people were just thriving. America was thriving, other places were thriving, there were no wars, and if there were wars, they were minor, right? They weren't major things that were going on. We didn't have the pestilences and earthquakes and all of the things that are currently happening right now. And these were all signs that the Messiah gave us in Matthew 24 of things that would come to pass prior to these birth pains. Again, if you haven't seen the Revelation 12 video, go watch it, and it'll explain the dream that Joseph was having and the things that would come to pass. It's telling you all of the things that are going to befall this woman that's in travail all throughout the prophets that'll give birth to the remnant of Jacob's seed, and they would be awoken and they would turn back to the Father in the same way that all of the prophets were sent, to turn the hearts of the children back to the Father, to get them to follow the Father's laws, statutes, and commandments, and to remind them of what happens when we don't. All right, verse 38. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this man? Speaking of Joseph. A man in whom the Spirit of Yahweh is. Again, confirming that Yahweh's Spirit most certainly was dwelling in men in the Old Testament. There's plenty of books that bear witness to this. People think that the Spirit of the Most High didn't dwell in men prior to the New Testament, which is false, completely false. Verse 39, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, forsomuch as Yahweh hath showed thee all of this, there is none so discreet and so wise as thou art. We're going to see this with Daniel again. Verse 40, Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all the people be ruled. So according to Joseph's word, all of Pharaoh's people will be under Joseph's authority. Now listen, again, very closely, continuing on in verse 40, this is the Father, Yahweh, and the Son's relationship. Only in the throne will I be greater than you, Joseph. This is what Pharaoh is saying to Joseph. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. The Father set the Messiah over all of the earth. Verse 42, And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand. This ring means kingship. And put it on Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. Go read Hebrews chapter 1, and you'll see how our Messiah was anointed in the same way. Not with jewelry, but with oil. Verse 43, And he made him to ride on the second chariot which he had led, and they cried before him, Bow the knee, and they made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh. Without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all of the land of Egypt. So again, this is a foreshadowing of our Messiah to come, and how Yahweh would raise this Messiah up, and he would place his words in this Messiah's mouth, and this Messiah would speak all of his words. And anyone that didn't hearken unto this prophet that was for to come, didn't hearken unto his words, Yahweh would require their life. That's Deuteronomy 18:15 through 18. Verse 45, And Pharaoh called Joseph's name, again, I don't know if I can pronounce this, but it's Zaphina, Prince of Life is what it means. And he gave him to wife Asna, the daughter of Potiphar. Now, we're going to cover who this Potiphar is very quickly. So don't get ahead of yourself and say, well, how is it that Joseph's marrying an Egyptian woman? It's where she's from, number one. It's not who she is. And I'm going to prove it to you guys with the scripture. Just hang on. Now, the name of her, Esneth, the daughter of Potiphar, means belonging to the sun, the priest of On. Okay, remember that, the priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Now, when I was mentioning this earlier, in the land of Egypt, you had the southern and the northern part, right? The northern part of Egypt was where the Egyptian kings would rule, and in the southern part was a mixture of peoples. Okay, so you had Hebrew people mixed in with Egyptian people, mixed in with all types of different people, just as we see on the day of Pentecost, when the people are touched with the Holy Spirit and they start speaking in cloven tongues, and all the people that are there from all the different regions, they're understanding their native language being spoken of by Hebrew men that they knew didn't understand their language prior, right? So that's, again, speaking in tongues. Verse 46, And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh the king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. Verse 47, And in the 7 plenteous years that the earth brought forth by her handfuls, or by the handfuls, meaning they had an abundance of wheat and all kinds of seeds that they were stocking and preparing, and they weren't just keeping them in one location. They were gathering these through Pharaoh's armies and men. They were gathering all of this through the 7 good years, and they would have stockpiles or storehouses all around in the land of Egypt. So think about these pyramids, and think about they didn't just have one purpose. They had multi-purposes. They had to have a place to store the food to keep them away from bugs and to keep the food safe, because if that food got destroyed, then all the people of the land would get wiped out as a result of that. Verse 48, And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up food in the cities, the food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. So every city round about Egypt they did the very same thing as gathering up all this food. Verse 49. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. Again, a foreshadowing of the promise that was made to the children of Israel, that the seed of Joseph, now at this point, now that the 12 patriarchs are born, Joseph is going to play a very important role in bringing forth this promised seed, which will disappoint Joseph to a certain degree because it's not as Joseph planned. But on the other hand, it'll be a blessing because it'll come through his two children. All right. Verse 50. And unto Joseph were born two sons before the years of famine came, with which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, bare unto him. Now, you can't be an Egyptian priest, right? So this is giving us, this is alluding to who Potiphar is. And again, these priests that were in this southern part of Egypt were called shepherd kings. So if you guys have not looked into this, I would strongly recommend you do some research on this if you are still struggling with whether or not the serpent seed is actual scripture or if it's a false doctrine. Okay? They were called shepherd kings. Verse 51. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, meaning forgetful. For Yahweh said, He hath made me to forget all of my toil and of all of my father's house. Verse 52. And the name of the second son called he Ephraim, meaning fruitful. For Yahweh hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Verse 53. And 7 years of plenteous that was in the land of Egypt were ended. So that means the beginning of the 7 bad years. Verse 54, and the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said, and the dearth was in all the lands, but all the land of Egypt there was bread. So in other words, there was food everywhere in Egypt. Verse 55, and when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he hath said to you, do. Verse 56. And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold unto all the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. Verse 57. And all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because the famine was so sore in all of the lands. Now, again, I said this last time as we start moving into the rest of this story. You can go into history and you can see that this was recorded throughout the 1700s through 1708, that there was in fact this very rough, extreme 7 good years and 7 bad years of famine. Also, the location of this, where Joseph has ended up, will be the same place that Mary and her Joseph will flee to keep our Savior alive later on in the New Testament. All right, Genesis chapter 42. Verse 1. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, Why do you guys look upon one another? Verse 2. He said, Behold, I have heard there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy some from thence, that we may live and not die. Verse 3. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. So we see that Benjamin stays behind, and the 10 other brothers are gone into Egypt. Verse 4. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. He's already lost one son, or at least he thinks. Verse 5. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn amongst those that came, and the famine was in the land of Canaan. Again, think about the location, guys. There was famine in the land where they were at, in Canaan, the promised land. Verse 6, and Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people in the land, and Joseph's brethren came and bowed themselves down before him with their faces to the earth. Verse 6 is fulfilling the prophecy of Joseph's dream that their sheaths, which represented them, would bow down to the earth before him. Okay, and this is just one place of many that it's going to be brought up, but this is prophecy coming to pass. So that silly kid that had the silly dream and a few chapters back is not so silly anymore. Verse 7, and Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them, but he made himself strange unto them, and he spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, whence cometh ye? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. And Joseph remembered the dream which he had dreamed of them, and said unto them, you are spies, to see the nakedness of the land are you now come. Verse 10, and they said unto him, nay, my master, but we are here to buy food, and that is why thy servants have come. Verse 11, we are of one man's son, we are true men, thy servant are no spies. Verse 12, and he said unto them, nay, but you came to see the nakedness of the land, is the reason why you're here. Verse 13, and they said, thy servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. Speaking of their brother who they threw in a pit, who they think is either being held captive or is no longer alive. Okay? Little do they know that's the one that's missing is standing right before them. Verse 14, and Joseph said unto them, that is it that I spake unto you, saying, ye are spies. Verse 15, hereby ye shall be provided by the life of Pharaoh. You shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. So because they opened their mouths and told Joseph that their younger brother, his natural brother from the same mother, was with his father, and now he wants to see his younger brother. So he's going to test them extremely. Verse 16, send one of you and let him fetch your brother, and you shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved whether they are true, or else the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. Verse 17, and he put them all together in wards for 3 days. Okay? And Joseph said unto them on the third day, do this and live, for I fear Yahweh. Verse 19, if you be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. So he's going to bind one of them and tell the rest of them to go and bring this younger brother back. Go ye, carry corn for the famine of your houses. Verse 20, but bring your youngest brother unto me, and you shall, so your words shall be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. Verse 21, and they said one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother. So here they are. They haven't fully gone out from the midst of Joseph yet. And now they're talking amongst themselves. And they say, we are very guilty concerning our brother, in that which we saw the anguish of his soul. So they knew when they were selling him what they had done, and they're very aware. This must have haunted them for a while, because they're saying here that they saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, but we did not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us. Verse 22, and Reuben answered them, saying, spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child, and you would not hear. Therefore, behold, also is his blood required. Verse 23, and they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. So they're still in the midst of Joseph, and they're saying all this to each other in their Hebrew tongue. But they didn't know that Joseph could understand them, because they think that he's solely speaking in the Egyptian language. And it verifies that because it says, "For he spake unto them through an interpreter," this entire time. Verse 24, "And he turned himself about from them, and he wept. And he returned them again, and communed with them, and took from them Simeon, and bound him before their eyes." So he had to leave the room. He starts crying because he's hearing the conversation, and it's probably bringing up some pretty raw emotions, right? Not only with them, but with him as well. Then he binds Simeon up in front of them, and then he tells them to go. Verse 25, "Then Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn, and to restore every man's money in his sack, and to give them provisions for the way, and he did thus unto them." So again, he's testing them once again. Verse 26, "And they laded their asses with corn, and departed from thence. And as one of them opened his sack to give his ass provender in the inn, he espied his money, for he beheld it was in his sack's mouth." Verse 28, "And he said unto his brethren, My money is restored, and lo, it is even in my sack. And their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, What is this that Yahweh has done unto us?" Verse 29, "And they came unto Jacob, their father, in the land of Canaan, and they told him all that had befell them, saying, The man who is the master over the land spake roughly unto us, and took us for spies of the country. And we said to him, We are true men, we are no spies. We be 12 brethren, sons of our father. One is not, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the master of the country, said unto us, Hereby shall I know that you are true men. Leave one of your brethren here with me, and take food for the famine of your households, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother unto me. Then I shall know that you are not spies, and that you are true men. So I will deliver you your brother, and you shall traffic in the land. Meaning, once they do this, they will be allowed to go back and forth. Verse 35, "And it came to pass when they emptied their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in the sack. And when they both they and their father saw the bundles of the money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said unto them, Me have you bereaved, my children. Joseph is not, and Simeon is not." So he's lost Joseph. Simeon is bound up in Egypt still. "And you will take Benjamin away? All of these things are against me. And Reuben spake unto his father, saying, Slay my 2 sons, if I bring him not back unto thee. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him to thee again." So Reuben, so far, has been the most righteous out of all of them. Verse 38, "And he said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him in the way in which ye go, then shall you bring down my gray hairs with sorrow unto the grave." Okay. Genesis chapter 43, verse 1. "And the famine was sore in the land, and it came to pass when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of the land of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go ye again and buy us a little food." So they didn't go right back. Right? Because they're waiting on their father to allow them to take their son. And once again, they're starting to starve. They're starting to run out of food, and Jacob knows this. Let's see. Verse 3, "And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, You shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. If thou wilt send our brother with us, we will go and buy thee food." So, again, there's a lot going on here, but they're still waiting for Jacob to give them the go-ahead. But they're ready to go back. They're ready to go back and get their brother who's bound up there, number one. And not only that, they're starving to death. Verse 5. But if thou wilt not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, you shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. Verse 6. And Israel, or Jacob, said, wherefore dealt ye so ill with me, to tell the man whether you had yet another brother? So in other words, why did you have to bring up Benjamin? You know I lost Joseph. Why did you have to bring up Benjamin? Verse 7. And they said, the man asked us straitly of our state and of our kindred, saying, is your father yet alive? And have ye another brother? And we told him according to the tenor of the words, that we could certainly know how could we certainly know that he would say, bring me down your brother? Verse 8. And Judah said unto Israel, or Jacob, his father, send the lad with me, and he will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. And I will be surety for him. In other words, he will stand bond for Benjamin, if anything happens. Of my hand shalt thou require him. If I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. Again, think of our Messiah. Yeshua stood bond for us, did he not? As a matter of fact, turn to John 17, and we're going to read verse 12. It says, this is the prayer that Yeshua was praying to the Father. He says, while I was with them in the world, I kept them in thy name. Those thou gavest me, I have kept, and none of them is lost, but the son of perdition, Judas, or Satan, right? Because Judas is the one that betrayed the Messiah, but the son of perdition is also referring to Satan, that the scripture might be fulfilled. So again, think of our Messiah in this instance, okay? And now think of Judah, because the Messiah represents the tribe of Judah, okay? And here Judah is standing up and saying to his father, send Benjamin with me, and if anything takes place, I will stand in for his place. I will stand bond for Benjamin. But it's foolish for us to sit here for all of us to die, because Benjamin will die also if you don't send him and we don't go and get food, because we're starving, right? All right, picking back up at verse 10. For except we had lingered, surely now we would have returned this second time. So Judah is making it clear. We could have already gone and been back, but you made us wait. Verse 11. And the fathers Israel said unto them, if it must be so now, do this, and take the best fruits of the land of your vessels, and carry down the man a present, and a little balm, and a little honey, and spices, and mirth, and nuts, and almonds. In other words, bring him gifts. And make sure that he understands that you're not spying out the land. And little does Jacob know what his sons have done to put Joseph in this place. But what a beautiful picture it's going to be at the end. Verse 12, and take double money in your hand, and the money that was brought again into the mouth of your sacks, and carried again in your hand, peradventure it was an oversight. It was an accident. Verse 13, take also your brother Benjamin, and arise and go again unto the man. Verse 14, and Yahweh Almighty give you mercy before the man, that you may send away your brother and Benjamin. If I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. So he's saying it is what it is at this point, go. Verse 15, and the men took that present, and they took double their money in their hand, and Benjamin, and they rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. So here they are again. And when Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the ruler of his house, bring these men home, and slay and make ready for these men shall dine with me at noon. So imagine what's going on in their minds now. They're probably, Scripture makes it clear that they're scared, but they're probably very afraid for their lives at this point, because now he's being ordered to be taken to Joseph's house. Verse 17, and the man did as Joseph bade, and the man brought the men into Joseph's house. Verse 18, and the men were afraid because they were brought into Joseph's house, and they said, because of the money that was returned into our sacks at the first time, we brought in, that he may seek occasion against us and fall upon us and take us for bondmen and our asses. Verse 19. And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house, and they communed with him at the door of the house. Verse 20. And said, O sir, we came indeed down at the first time to buy food. 21. And it came to pass, when we came to the inn, that we opened our sacks, and behold, every man's money was in the mouth of the sack, and our money in full weight, and we have brought it again in our hand. So remember, he's speaking through them by an interpreter. So this is who they're talking to right now, and they're explaining, we left here the first time, and when we got home, we realized all of our money was still there. So we've come and we've brought that money, and we've brought more money. Okay? Verse 22. And other money have we brought down into the hands to buy food. We cannot tell who put the money in our sacks. So they're being completely transparent here. Verse 23. And he said, Peace be with you, fear not. Your Elohim and the Elohim of your father hath given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. So he's saying, oh, don't worry about all that. It must have been Yahweh that put the money back in your sack, because I had your money this whole time, so don't worry about it. And he brought Simeon out to them, and he released Simeon and made, sorry, where did I go? Sorry, I don't know why it was a note here. I'm trying to convey that Simeon's been released, and again, this interpreter made it clear that he had their money and everything is all good to go. So now, as we move into the next couple verses, pay close attention to what's going on. Verse 24. And the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet and gave their asses provender. Verse 25. And they made ready the present against Joseph came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. Now listen, it is an abomination for an Egyptian man to eat with the Hebrew men, okay? So pay close attention to what happens. Verse 26. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into their house, and bowed themselves to the earth. Again, fulfilling that prophecy. Verse 27. And he asked them of their welfare, and he said, Is your father well? The old man whom you spake, is he yet alive? Again, this is all being done through an interpreter. And they said, Thy servant, our father, is in good health. He is yet alive. And they bowed their heads and made obeisance. Again, making sure that prophecy is fulfilled. Verse 29. And he lifted up his eyes, and he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your younger brother of whom you spake unto me? And he said, Yahweh be gracious unto thee, my son. Verse 30. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother, and he sought where to weep, and he entered into his chamber and wept there. So Joseph is displaying a strong amount of walking in the Spirit in obedience to the Father at this point, because he's dying to tell his brothers what's going on, but he has to test them. He has to know that they are not going to do to Benjamin what they did to him. And again, you have to remember, when the children were being born in the prior chapters, they were born, Benjamin and Joseph were born of Rebekah. Okay? Verse 31, And he washed his face, and he went out and refrained himself, and said, Set on bread. Verse 32, And they set on for him by himself, and by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with them by themselves. They would not eat together, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with Hebrews, for it is an abomination unto the Egyptians. Verse 33, And they sat before him now listen, Listen to what Joseph is going to do here. How would Joseph know this? And they sat before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled at one another. They're looking at each other. These brothers are looking at each other, and they're saying, how does he know the order of our birthright? Because he's their brother. That's how. They should know by this time what's going on, but they don't. Verse 34. And he took and sent messes, meaning food, unto them. But before Benjamin's mess was 5 times the amount of theirs, and they drank and were merry with him. Why do you think he just gave Benjamin 5 times the amount of food that he gave to the rest of them? He's testing them to make sure that their hearts are in the right place. That what he just overheard them saying before they left the land the first time, that they were grieved by seeing his soul when they did what they did to him, right? So now it's going to be continual testing until he's sure that their hearts have changed and that they're not going to do what they did to Benjamin, because he has to know. But he also already knows the reason why he's here was not because of his brothers, but because of Yahweh. Genesis chapter 44, verse 1. And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, fill the men's sacks with food as much as they can carry, and put every man's money back in his sack's mouth. Verse 2. Now listen. And put my cup, the silver cup, in the sack of the mouth of the youngest, and in his corn money, and did according to all the word that Joseph had spoken. So now Joseph's taken his silver cup and placed it in Benjamin's sack, and returned all their money, and filled up as much food as they can carry. All right, verse 3. And as soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away, they and their asses. Verse 4. And when they were gone out of the city, not yet far from Joseph, Joseph said unto his steward, up, follow after the men, and when thou doest overtake them, say unto them, wherefore have you rewarded evil for good? Verse 5. Is not this it in which my master drinketh, and whereby indeed he divineth? You have done evil in doing so. And he's telling the servant what to tell them once he finds this cup in their sacks. Verse 6. And he overtook them and spake unto them these same words. Verse 7. And they said unto him, wherefore saith my master these words? Yahweh forbid thy servant should do according to this thing. Behold, the money which we found in our sacks' mouths we brought again unto thee out of the land of Canaan. How should we then steal out of our master's house silver and gold? Verse 9. With whomsoever of thy servants it be found, both let him die, and we also will be thy master's bondmen. Again, this is the same thing that happened to Jacob, right? When Laban overtakes Jacob, and Jacob says, search all the tents, and if you find that any of your stuff that's missing, let that man be put to death. Again, they have no idea. In their minds, they're free. They didn't do anything wrong the first time, and they made it clear. And so, again, this is kind of a dangerous thing to say. Let both him die, and we will also be your servants. Verse 10. And he said, now also let it be according unto your words. He with whom it is found shall surely be my servant, and you shall be blameless. Verse 11. Then they speedily took down every man's sack onto the ground, and opened every man's sack. And he searched, again, listen, and began at the eldest, and left at the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Verse 13. Then they rent their clothes, laden every man his asses, and returned unto the city. So they didn't leave Benjamin, because the servant just told him, the only one that has to stay is the one in whom's the cup is found. And they all got back on their asses, and they all went back into the city. This is what Joseph was testing. Verse 14, and Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house, for he was yet there, and they fell before him on the ground. Verse 15, and Joseph said unto them, what deed is this that you have done? Wot ye not that such a man as I certainly divine? Basically, he's saying, do you not realize that I am such a man of power that I could take your heads right here where you stand? Why would you do this? Verse 16, and Judah said, what shall we say, my master? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? Yahweh hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are thy master's servants, both we and he also with whom the cup is found. Verse 17, and he said, Yahweh forbid that I should do so, but the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get up you in peace unto your father. Again, testing them to see if they're going to leave Benjamin behind. He's giving them a chance. He's saying, you can be free. It wouldn't be righteous of me to do this, to keep all of you, because I told you I would only keep the man whose sack my cup is found in. Right? Verse 18. Now listen. Then Judah came near unto him and said unto him, O my master, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word into my master's ears, and let not thy anger burn against thy servant. For thou art even as Pharaoh. In other words, he's confirming that he is equal in power with Pharaoh. Verse 19, my master asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said unto my master, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, a little one, and his brother is dead. But he's obviously not dead, right? And he's alone. He alone is left of his mother and of his father, and his father loveth him. And thou saidst unto thy servants, bring down unto me, that I may set my eyes upon him. And we said unto our master, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father, his father would die. Verse 23, sorry. And thou saidst unto thy servants, except your younger brother come down with you, you shall see my face no more. Verse 24, and it came to pass, when we came up unto thy servant, my father, we told him all the words of our master, meaning him. And our father said, go again and buy us a little food. Verse 26, and we said, we cannot go down if our youngest brother be with us, then we will go down. For we may not see the man's face except for our youngest brother be with us. Verse 27, and thy servant, my father, said unto us, ye know that my wife bare me 2 sons. Okay, so this is probably really rough at this point, right? This is getting rough for all of them, because they're on the verge of letting them, Benjamin's on the verge of letting them know what they did to their younger brother, and they still don't know Joseph is their brother, okay? And now he's having to explain what's going to befall their father if Benjamin doesn't return, or if Judah doesn't return with Benjamin, okay? Verse 28, and the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn into pieces, and I saw him not since. Okay, so he's kind of explaining what happened, but he's not saying the full story. Verse 29, and if you take also from me the mischief befall him, you shall bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. Now therefore, when I come to thy servant, my father, and the lad be not with us, seeing that his life is bound up in the lad's life. Verse 31, it shall come to pass, when he seeth that his lad is not with us, that he will die. And thy servants shall bring down gray hairs of thy servants of thy fathers with sorrow to the grave. Verse 32, for thy servant became a surety for the lad unto my father, saying, if I bring him not unto thee, then I shall bear the blame for my father forever. Verse 33, very important. Now therefore I pray thee, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, a bondman to my master, and let the lad go up with his brethren. Judah just asked Joseph to take the place of Benjamin. Okay? And this is exactly what our Messiah did. Our Messiah took our place. Okay? One brother dying for another. And according to Scripture, what is the greatest gift that a man can give? His own life. Verse 34. For how shall I go up to my father, and the lad be not with me, lest peradventure I see the evil that shall come unto my father? Genesis chapter 45, verse 1. Then Joseph could not refrain himself before them that stood by him, and he cried, Cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren. So he made all of his Egyptian servants leave, and he's weeping very loudly, so loud that the Egyptian people can hear it. Verse 2, and he wept aloud, and the Egyptians of the house of Pharaoh heard. Verse 3, and Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Doeth my father yet live? And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. Verse 4, and Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Verse 5, now therefore be not grieved, nor be angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For Yahweh did send me before you to preserve your life. Pure wisdom, people. Pure wisdom. He's gone through all of this trouble, right? From being 17 years old, being sold into Egypt, having been thrown into prison, but Yahweh still exalted him. Why? Because he was obedient. All right? And now he's telling his brethren, don't be grieved with yourselves or be angry with yourselves, and don't take this burden upon yourselves. This was Yahweh that caused this to happen. For Yahweh knew that he would send me before you to save your lives. Verse 6. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are still 5 more years left. Okay? In which there shall neither be earing, which is breaking up of the ground, nor harvest. Verse 7. And Yahweh sent me before you to preserve your posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. And again, he's trying not to boast in this, guys. He's trying to make it clear to them that it was Yahweh, not him. Verse 8. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but Yahweh, and he hath made me a father. Abe is the Hebrew word for father there, and it's a Hebrew meaning of the highest office of Egypt to Pharaoh. So he's saying he has made me a father to Pharaoh and the master of all of his house to be ruler throughout the land of Egypt. Verse 9, haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, Yahweh hath made me master in all of the land of Egypt. Come down unto me, and tarry not, and do not make me wait any longer. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Tarry means don't hold me up. Come, get yourself into this land, because there's still 5 years left of this famine. Verse 10, and thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, which is lower Egypt, and thou shalt be near him, or shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children and thy children's children, and thy flocks and thy herds, and all that thou hast. Now listen, there's a reason why these shepherd kings lived in the lower portion of Egypt. it's an abomination for Egyptian people to have sheep in their land. Okay, number one. So Joseph's telling him to go down to sending his brothers back and to bring back all of their children's children and their flocks and herds. So again, look into this shepherd kings. The Hebrew meaning of this word is hiskos, which is spelled Hyksos. I think that's how you pronounce it. Hiskos. Again, we see this in Africa currently. Verse 11. And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. Verse 12. And behold, your eyes see, and your eyes, meaning your eyes can see. He's saying to his brethren, your eyes can see that I am blessed here in this land. So go back and tell my father what you have witnessed with your eyes, right? So he's saying, you can see that I'm in control here. Now go back to our father and tell him what you've seen. So he's saying, behold, your eyes and your eyes of my brethren, that is in my mouth that speaketh unto you. And you shall tell my father of my glory in Egypt, and all that you have seen, and you shall haste to bring down my father hither. Verse 14. And he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. So again, these two brothers from the same mother are reunited. Verse 15. Moreover, he kissed all of his brethren and wept upon them. And after that, his brethren talked with him. Verse 16. And the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come, and it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. So Pharaoh, you have to understand what type of Pharaoh this is, number one. If we look at the story of Rakian and Jasher, we see that the very first man that was named Pharaoh was a Hebrew man. Okay? That's first and foremost. We'll go into that. That's a different study, which I've already done on this channel. On YouTube, you can go watch the videos of who Israel is and all of that. Verse 17. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, say unto thy brethren, this do ye, lade your beast and go, get into the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households, and come unto me, and I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat of the fat of the land. This is Pharaoh telling them what to do. Verse 19. Now thou art commanded, this do ye, take you wagons out of the land of Egypt, and your little ones, and your wives, and bring your fathers, and come. So he's not just sending them back on their asses, he's sending them with wagons and plenty of stuff to get them back safely. And again, there's 5 years of famine left. And you know that people are desperate in this time. This is why he's doing this. He wants to make sure that they get back safely. Verse 20, also, regard not your stuff. Don't worry about the stuff in Canaan. For the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. Okay, verse 21, and the children of Israel did so. And Joseph gave them wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh, and gave them provisions for the way. Verse 22, to all of them he gave each man changes of raiment, but Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of remnant. Okay, so again, we saw that he gave Benjamin 5, which is grace. He gave him 5 times the amount of food that he gave his brethren. Now, when he's sending them out, he's giving Benjamin 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment. Okay, verse 23. And to his father he sent after this manner 10 asses laden with good things, the good things of Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. Verse 24. So he sent his brethren away, and they departed, and he said unto them, see that ye fall not out of the way. Meaning, again, we're living in dangerous times. There's a famine. Go get your father. Only grab the stuff that's important to you and get back here before things get worse. Verse 25. And they went up out of Egypt and came into the land of Canaan unto Jacob their father. Verse 26. And they told him, saying, Joseph is yet alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart fainted, for he believed them not. Listen, guys, our Father doesn't make mistakes. Okay? Even throughout the genealogies, even throughout all of these books, there is always a way to find out what the truth is. And the truth is what is setting all of us free. So if you're not willing to study this out, truly study it out. And I think that just in the book of Genesis, which we're almost in chapter 46, I think we have three chapters left after 46. I think it's 49 if I'm right. So just out of the book of Genesis, how many things have we been saying over the last several years? How many things have I proven to you already about who the people are that are being blessed and following the seed line of the people that are blessed from the beginning? And again, does our Father change? Of course not. Everything remains the same. Verse 27. And they told him all the words which he had said unto them, and he saw the wagons which Joseph had sent to carry him, and the spirit of Jacob their father revived, meaning he's more than happy. He knows Benjamin is safe, number one. He knows now that his son Joseph, who he thought for all of this time was unalive, and he's revived again. He's not depressed. He's not upset. He's thankful for everything that the Father is doing. And we're going to see again in the next chapter exactly what happens. Verse 28. And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is alive. All right, it cut out there, guys. Did you guys hear me read verse 28? No. Okay. Some say yes. All right, let me read verse 28. It said, And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is alive, and I will go see him before I die. All right, so there's prophecy in this as well. I'm going to end the live here, and we'll pick it back up because we got 46 through 49 to go through. And again, I want to make sure these aren't too long. But when we come back, we're going to cover how Jacob is going to bless Joseph, but not the way that Joseph wants the blessing, not the way that Joseph expects the blessing, right? And you're going to see that this goes all the way back to when Jacob and his sons dealt with Shechem, okay? So there's a lot of prophecy, especially in Genesis chapter 49, that we have to go through. And that's going to take a good while to cover all of chapter 49. So we'll cover, when I come back, we'll cover 46, 47, 48, and then we'll end it at 48. And then on chapter 49, we're going to take our time because there's going to be a lot of prophecy in chapter 49 regarding all of the children. Okay, so when we come back to do Genesis chapter 46, we're going to see all of the children, and we're going to see the reuniting of the father, Jacob or Israel, with his son. And then we're going to prove to you who this Pharaoh is. Okay, and I'm going to show you that he was a shepherd king himself, because he asks of the children that come that if there are any of them that are good with taking care of sheep or flocks, to put them over his own flock. Okay? Once again, we have to look at all of the books in order to get these types of understandings. To know that the scribe of the lying pen that people hate so much when we bring that up, it is true. It's in most of all of the books that we read. You'll find that there are remnants of truth in some of these books, and then you have Satan that has altered some of them. So the only true way to find something out, number one, is to study it. And number two, you see that Yahweh used two witnesses in a dream for Pharaoh to prove to him that this thing was going to come to pass. Okay? But it wasn't just any Pharaoh that he was dealing with. This Pharaoh, again, was the land that they're in of Goshen will also bear witness to who the Pharaoh is, right? The fact that these, I'm trying to think of the best way I can word this. These shepherd priests, again, do your research on the shepherd priests or the shepherd kings, and you will see that they were priests unto the land. And then once we finish Genesis, I'm going to go over the story of Moses marrying. People are saying Moses married an Egyptian woman. Yes, she was from Egypt. That was not who she was. I hear people saying that Rahab was a harlot because they don't read that chapter and understand what that chapter is saying. They assume that Rahab was a harlot when really Rahab dealt in fine linen. Hence the reason she lets them down out of the building with a scarlet line, right? That's even what she hangs in the window. But she uses linen to let them down out of the window when they go to spy the land. And it tells you a lot in that chapter when you read about Rahab. It tells you that she had people around her that were probably not being very nice to her because she was doing better off than they were. And you got to think also, what did she hide them under? What did she hide the two men under? She hid them under the same material that they were making fine linen out of. Yeah, Rahab was a Moabite, but where did the Moabites come from? Go back and read the end of Genesis chapter 19, and you'll see that the Moabite lineage comes from Lot and his two daughters that were left. So again, there's a lot of people trying to change the scriptures, not understanding the genealogies bear witness to who they are. Number one. So we've got Moses, Rahab, and there was someone else that they keep bringing up that's not coming to mind right this second. Ruth. People are saying that Ruth was not of the tribes of Israel. Again, when we finish this book of Genesis, we will prove all three of those, okay? And we will very easily put all of this nonsense to rest. Because so far we've seen Yahweh has not allowed, not even Judah, when Judah mixed seed, and that's on the last video that I posted, and it's in chapter 38, you'll see when Judah mixed his seed, Yahweh unalived his children. And if you go read the book of Maccabees, you'll see that Yahweh made all of the men who were mixing seed leave their wives and children behind. Again, there's a lot in the book of Maccabees that will help us to better understand Genesis chapter 49 especially. A lot of that has to do with what we're going to go through in Genesis chapter 49. So I'm going to leave off here in this with picking back up in Genesis chapter 46. I have a couple things I need to take care of before that, but I wanted to go back and make sure I cover this video properly because last time I skipped over a couple things and I don't know how I did that, but I did it nonetheless. And I wanted to make sure that this video was telling the story of Joseph clearly, right? So we at least got through the fact that Joseph has revealed to his brothers and he's sending back now to his father to go gather his father up. And then we can close this chapter out with who this Pharaoh is and why he found favor with Joseph. And why, when we look at the hieroglyphs, the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, why does it show the original Egyptian people mixed in with the Hebrew people? Well, because there was a lot going on in the land, again, that bears witness to everything that we were just talking about. So I hope this is opening people's eyes because that's my goal. I can read this book by myself. I don't necessarily like reading it line for line, verse for verse, and going through every book. But if it helps people to learn, then so be it. Because again, the things that are coming to, especially with this generation right now, we're about to go through some very, very rough times. And we're seeing that there is about to be a famine in the land. But the famine that's going to come upon the land in the end days is not necessarily a famine of food. It's a famine of the word, the Torah, the teachings, right? So we have to make sure that we understand even the flood. We went through the great flood. We know that the flood that comes from Satan uh, right now is a flood of nations. And as Mike has been posting, you guys should be seeing that every nation is being flooded by the second, uh, the remnant of the second child of Abraham. So we see that Hagar gives birth to Ishmael, but Ishmael, again, the firstborn, Yahweh knew that Ishmael was going to mix seed, the same way he knew the firstborn Esau was going to mix seed. And you see that the birthright is always being protected, as we're going to see with Ephraim and his brother Manasseh. When we go through here, you're going to see that Jacob, before he dies, he doesn't bless the two children the way that Joseph is expecting this to happen. But you'll see that Joseph also receives a blessing from his father. So his father is going about this in a very smart way by blessing both the children, and in doing so, he's blessing the father, Joseph, as well. And with the blessing that he gives to Joseph has to do with what he took from the chapter where they took Dinah, the daughter, and tried to defile her, and how they took and spoiled that land. He's going to bless Joseph with that. And so Joseph isn't quite going to understand why his father is about to bless him in this way until after. Okay, so it's going to take us a while to get through that. But once we get through Genesis, which we're almost there, then we're going to go right into the book of Exodus, and we're going to keep on I at least want to cover the first 5 books, which is the Torah, so that people have the knowledge and understanding to study and to always have your foundation established on that. The Torah is the most important thing. And you're going to see, even when all the laws and stuff are being given, there's always a mention of Yahweh warning the people not to mix seed. The book of Leviticus is full of it as well. We see that they're mixing seed. The book of every book, it's in every book, guys, and it's mind blowing in the New Testament how much this is spoken of. But yet people don't understand it because they're not established in the beginning of the book. So that being said, we're leaving off here on Genesis chapter 45. We just finished, and we will pick back up in Genesis chapter 46. So I will see you guys soon.